Hello, and welcome back to Business by the Books, the podcast that teaches you how to use your financials to better manage your business. All right, Nicole, welcome back to Business by the Books. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Danielle.
So you are a returning guest, and I really appreciate you being willing to share your experience and be so vulnerable. I think that there is a hustle culture, grow, only celebrating the growth mentality. And what we've seen in our experience through Kickstarter over the last 10 years is there's some clients who want that. They want that scalability. They want to grow their business. And we have other business owners who decide that they want a business that fits their life and their journey today. So let's take this back a moment. Tell the audience who you are, what you do, and then we can dive into your journey.
My name's Nicole Salcida. I am in the Bay Area. I have a boutique interior design firm. And then 3 years ago, we opened up our first brick and mortar, which is I for Pretty at Home, which has been really exciting to be able to bring kind of our interior design aesthetic to our town, I would say, with accessories and gift ideas and just a little bit of our style that could be purchased, which has been great. I have been doing this now for about 10 years. I would say I started an Instagram account 10 years ago for my design business. And since then, I've just seen it grown exponentially. I've gone through a ton of changes, and it's been really helpful working with you guys at Kickstart, not only for the number side of things, but also for the mentorship. So thank you for that.
Of course. Yeah. Our team has really been leaning into that, especially I think over the last year of embracing the fact that yes, numbers are important, but just what are the emotions around the numbers? Are we taking enough time to celebrate them? Are we excited about them? Does the energy match what's actually happening? And what do we want to do?
It's really like a holistic approach. I feel like that you guys do. And I feel like that is so needed, especially for many interior designers who a lot of us didn't go into it for the business side of things, right? We did it because we were creative and we wanted to, make beautiful homes and make functional spaces, but really we didn't have that business foundation. So I feel like that's where Kickstarter has really supported me.
Well, let's dig in a little bit let's take this back, maybe not a full 10 years, but let's say over the last 5, when you were building the business, what did you see as the goal of your business?
Well, I think that's a great place to start because I never had a business plan. I never had a firm, concrete vision of what I wanted this to be. I kind of jumped in with both feet going, okay, I love this and let's see where it's going to go. And I was by myself for a long time in the beginning. It wasn't until I started working with therapist who I love. I've worked with her, throughout my whole life, but I started talking to her about, the business I was going into and how overwhelmed I was and all the hats I was wearing. And she's like, you really need to start hiring. You need to find people that could play to your strengths and your weaknesses, and hire out. So that's when I first started hiring. Yeah. And honestly, I didn't know who my first hire was. We probably talked about this last podcast. I didn't think it was another designer because I was still very much in the weeds of learning that, I was the main creator of I for Pretty and I wasn't ready to hire for that yet. It was just somebody to come in and figure out what I needed help with. And that turned out to be operations and the business side of things. So that was my first hire. And then I think you and I have touched on this before is I wanted to get bigger. I wanted to grow. I wanted my name to be out there. I was just saying yes to everything and kind of burning the candle at both ends. I kept hiring and eventually I did hire more designers and take on more projects. And there's so much wonderful opportunities that come your way when you're growing and you're scaling your business. And it was very exciting, but it's also very taxing.
What do you think were the drivers of you being excited to do that type of growth? Like what was driving that?
Yeah, I think the inquiries were coming in really fast and heavy, and they were amazing opportunities that I didn't want to say no to. So that's when I started, really trying to think of, okay, who could I bring in to help me? And it was other, designers, technical designers. And girls that kind of had the same vision of me, and they knew, that this is like, where I was going. I was definitely growing and wanting to take on more projects. So there was always something or someone, or call it social pressure on me, to keep going and getting bigger and better.
I want to intertwine some of the numbers as you were going through this journey. So at the time, what numbers were you looking at that helped you see if you were on the right track and ultimately led to your decision to right size the business?
I guess in the beginning, I didn't really know. I think, like a lot of small business owners, not just interior design businesses, but just small business owners, I was just looking at the number I was charging on the invoice. So, you know, it was the money was coming in, but I didn't really know where the money was going out either. So I didn't have a good grasp on the numbers. It was only until I hired out for that part of the business that, I started educating myself on what those numbers actually meant, the profit and loss, and looking at the jobs that were the inquiries that were coming in to really see if those jobs were going to be profitable or not. Because in the beginning, I would take everything, anyone that was willing to sign contract with me and said yes to my hourly rate, I was taking on those projects. And now we're very, very particular about the projects that we take on. And, yes, it comes down to the numbers, but it also comes down to my time and my
Yeah.
priorities. And my priorities in life have definitely shifted over the last 10 years. And I like the term, right sizing instead of downsizing, because that does speak to my, just where I am in my life, I guess.
I remember one of our calls where we were actually reviewing the time by project and you realizing how much time was actually being coded to internal Eye for Pretty time, how much time in team meetings, culture building, the beginning of a project before that was actually billed to a client and afterwards. All those little pieces of building a team and culture that we actually don't think about as real tangible expenses.
Right. And not to say those aren't very important, right? Because they are. When you're building a business, you want the right people to work for you. You want the culture to feel good and for people to be excited to come to work. But you're right, all of that does come with a price.
Mhm. Talk a little bit about you as you were building a team. How did that feel for you as a designer versus leader?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, you have to give up some control, right? And if you are very type A and you're used to always being in charge of everything and having the final say, it's a little bit tricky. I think what I learned was, I always stayed the creative visionary, I would say, of the company. So every project that came our way, I would, talk about it with the designer and we would go over, the overall aesthetic of the design. But ultimately, the girls that I hired, I trusted to bring the Eye for Pretty vision to life without me. And yes, I was a little bit involved in the projects where I would oversee things and they would send me drafts and things to approve. I wasn't in the weeds in all of the projects. So for a little bit, I liked it. It was nice to be able to actually be able to take care of, the business initiatives and like the business side of things instead of actually being the designer on every project. But you also start to lose yourself a little bit in that process. And you forget why you started in the first place when you really are just so in the weeds of being in the business.
Ultimately, what drove you to make the decision to right size the business?
I think there was definitely a few factors. Like you, Danielle, my kids are getting older, and I know everyone said that like it's so hard when they're little, and yes, it is hard, and you're tired, and it's hard in different ways. But now that my kids are teenagers, it's like I want to be there for them emotionally. That's what takes up most of my time. My priority is my kids and my husband, and you realize that you only have a limited amount of time left with them. I have 5 years left, my kids in my house. And yeah, I think that was my main priority of right sizing, is making more time for my family. And how I was going to do that was going to be by not taking on as many projects. I had to find projects that were the most profitable And that really filled my cup in order to say yes. So that wasn't, I guess, the number of projects, it was just the quality of the projects.
There's a little bit
And
of letting go of ego with that, right? Like, I'm not gonna be the
so
person to say
true.
yes.
So true. And it took time to get to this place. You know, I for a few years had a great PR team that I loved, and they really helped push our name out there, and so many amazing opportunities came my way with the PR firm, publications, speaking opportunities, awards, like all of the things that do feed your
Mhm.
ego, you know? And I said, okay, it's a really big monthly expense and I love them, but what is the end goal of working with the PR firm? You know, I feel not that I've done it all because I definitely have things that I still want to accomplish with the business, but like what is my main goal in owning a business at this point in my life? And in terms of having employees, it was, you know, a lot of my employees were kind of ready to go off on their own. And I knew that and I didn't want to hold them back. That's, you know, I kind of always knew that I for Pretty was probably not their last, you know, stop. And you know, I dream big for myself, and that's what I want for everyone that comes into my life and my employees as well. So I was ready to let some of them go, and they were ready to go off on their own.
Talk about the shop because in this growth journey, you also opened up a brick and mortar. What made you make that decision?
Well, I started off low, I think, with that one. I started having a pop up shop in my actual office that I was working in, and I would buy a small amount of inventory and be open certain times of the month. And I think because that was really successful and people were asking for more, it gave me the confidence to open up the brick and mortar. And yeah, I mean, obviously retail is a whole nother beast and it's something, it's a very, I'm on a very high learning curve, even 3 years into it.
How did it feel to be a beginner again?
Yeah, it's hard. It's so exciting in the beginning. It's like having a baby. It's the same thing, right? You're so excited to birth this baby and get it off in the world, and after the excitement, you have a little bit of like a, "Oh, what, oh my gosh,
I
what
have to
did I
keep this.
do?
I
I
have
have
to
to
keep this
sustain
alive.
this. I have to keep this alive." And that's the growing pains I'm in year 3 here is you have to retail is very seasonal and you have to be able to ride the highs and the lows.
Let's hang on that. So, how are you riding the highs and the lows in that? And during that time, how has that helped you embrace your mindset around debt?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, I definitely do better at times with the slow in the shop. And I guess, you know, 3.5, almost 4 years in now, it's a lot of reminders of, okay, this happened last year. We're going to be okay. You know, I'll call you Danielle and I'll be like, Danielle, and you're like, remember, you know, this is January. This is after, you know, holidays. But it's not easy. I would say it takes a certain type of a person to have a retail shop. There's a ton of inventory that I carry at all times. And so that's kind of where the debt piece comes in is how do you get that inventory out the door? How are you moving it? Yeah, it's definitely a different mindset of, yeah, it's tricky.
I think seasonality is something that every business experiences. So I appreciate you sharing that because whatever it might be, I know yours is January and February, and then again in the summer. Is there
Yes.
anything else that you feel like you're doing when you approach the numbers and cash management or even mindset approaching each of those seasons?
Yeah, it definitely takes planning, right? I mean, like for us, we purchase our holiday in the summertime, and summer is our slowest time in the shop because everyone's on vacation in the summer. And so it definitely takes planning, not just, you know, a month out, but 6 months, a year out of planning and knowing where that cash is going to come from. We've had to get creative in ways of like we do a lot of installs through our shop. So clients will hire us to style their home, and I plan for what months those are going to happen, knowing that that's going to bring cash in the door, hopefully in our slower months, having those installs. It definitely takes planning. You can't just kind of throw your hands up and say, like, I'm just going to let whatever happen.
I think the budget process has also been really helpful of, you're a few years into creating that budget and familiar with looking at the numbers and understanding that the seasonality is coming, I just want to acknowledge how much of a journey you've been on because at the
It
beginning of our
really has been.
relationship, yeah,
Yeah.
you were like, "I don't know where the cash is going. I don't understand that," or "Where is the profit? How do I pay myself more?" They're just very common things that there wasn't like a light bulb moment where, oh, in month 3 of looking at your numbers, it all was clear. I think it's been a steady journey of each year that we've gone through it together, of learning what we could do differently, learning how to plan for it. Even paying taxes is a huge event every year. So how do
Yeah.
we make sure that we're planning from a cash perspective and from a holistic from your entire family? How are
Yeah.
we making sure that we're looking at that holistically? So I just want to acknowledge what a journey you've been on. And
Yeah, and I think a lot of us kind of bury our head in the sand when it comes to money and numbers, and especially when you're a creative, or creator, or you're very, that's not something that you're necessarily strong at. So working with somebody like you guys, I think is really life changing because you're not making decisions based on emotion. And we talk about this a lot, right? Is I used to make a lot of business decisions on how I felt about things. And that, while yes, maybe people love my big heart, it's not always going to serve me best, right? Because it's not a good decision for the business. And that actually goes along with hiring too, and letting people go. Is I lead with my heart, and what I realized is managing people is not my strength. I am a better friend, I feel like, and I'm very, empathetic, and it's hard for me to manage people and be the person that says no to people. And that was also a big part in my right sizing journey is, not managing so many people or hiring managers to
to
manage the
manage.
people,
Oh,
right? Like
yeah.
I have this amazing shop manager who she manages the shop team, so I don't have to. So I think just making those decisions have been helpful.
I think you did a beautiful job in your right sizing of understanding the data. We had lots of conversations with our team that you understood the data, you were making the decision from a place of strength and confidence, but also keeping your team in mind and giving them what they deserved and the grace that they deserved. And I think you did a really beautiful job of combining both data with empathy.
Thank you. I think, especially in the world we live in with social media and all of the things, people are going to want to talk, or people will talk, right? People will say, oh my gosh, her designer left. She went off on her own. She joined another firm. But again, that's like the ego talking, right? If I take offense to that because I know it's not true, or I know the good terms we ended on, it's like, let people talk and let people think what they want. I'm doing what's right for me and my family and my business.
I heard somebody say, "What other people say about me is none of my business."
Yeah,
It's their
exactly.
business.
Yep. I know. And I think as we get older, we realize that even more. I don't know if you like Mel Robbins, but her book, Let Them, is such a good book of, they're going to talk, like, let them. Like,
Yeah.
there's it's not about you, it's really about them. So, yeah. So, I think the other thing I did, Danielle, too, when I kind of did this right sizing is we looked at, where were the monthly expenses? And one of my biggest expenses was rent. I had two
Mhm. Yes.
spaces, right? I had a design studio and I had the shop. The design studio we used it maybe once or twice a week. It sat there empty. Most of my designers work from home. And so that was another kind of gut check of, why am I holding on to this space? Is it feeding my ego? Because I could say I have a design studio, right? And I have a shop. So I think just asking yourself those hard questions, I think, is really helpful when it comes to making business decisions.
As you embark on the next chapter, how are you keeping your mindset strong, staying true to these core values, just thinking about that next chapter?
Yeah, I think about that a lot. And again, it kind of goes back to obviously what is the most profitable and isn't too taxing on my time. and what is going to serve me and my family and make me happy. And for me, it's been a lot of, I do these custom builds with my builder, and I am the lead on that. It's just me. It's just my time and him. So those have been very successful and profitable. The shop is a little bit of I don't know what's going to happen with the shop. I would love to sit here and say I'm going to have the shop forever, but that's just not reality in retail. The shop is doing well. It's holding its own. My main thing with the shop is that it brings us so much joy and happiness. And even if it's hard, I want to stick with it as long as I can. So I don't know what's going to happen with the shop, honestly. I'm going to hold on to it for right now, but no promises of keeping the shop. And yeah, just taking on projects with people that I really trust and respect, I think is important to me too.
I appreciate you sharing that. And I appreciate you giving everyone who's listening permission to run their businesses that align with their core values. We don't have to hustle more. We don't have to work more. You don't need to do more. There's nobody that you need to catch up to. Maybe if we can lead from a place of our values and not our ego, where we want to see our lives. Do you share this with your kids? Do they know that you're taking this step back for
A,
them, but with
a little
them?
bit. I don't think we talk about it as much as just like I show up, I'm here. Like and my husband is actually very, present too. He works from home a lot. And I think it's going to be one of those things where they look back on it and they say like, my mom was around.
Yeah. Awesome. Any closing thoughts?
I don't think so. We touched on it. I think I love, again, what you said about right sizing. I think when you're just starting the business, I think, of course, you're going to hustle and you're going to grow and you're going to want all the things. And then I think you come to a place where either it's too much or you're wearing all the hats, you're tired, you're burnt out. And then I think that's where you start to really kind of dive deep into your core values and why you started and what you really want. So yeah, I think that's it.
Well, thank you so much for being here. And thank you for sharing so openly and honestly.
Thanks for having me again.
If you are a business owner who needs a money team, I invite you to go to kickstartaccountinginc.com or click the link in the show notes and come and book a discovery call. The Kickstart Accounting Inc. team and I are here to be a resource for you on your entrepreneurial journey. We want to take bookkeeping off of your plate and help arm you with the information you need to grow and thrive in your business. Don't wait, click the link below and let's get started.